Hey guys, it's Jess from Misfortune Astrology. How's everybody doing? So, the time has come for me to make this video. I have been kind of sitting on the fence about whether to make it for a while, although I kind of assumed that eventually I would. I was just kind of waiting for the right time, waiting for things to die down a little bit, and it's, kind of all of a sudden dawned on me that things are not going to die down anytime soon. We're just in for a bumpy ride, and I'm making this video, with full awareness of the repercussions that there will probably be people who decide to unfollow me after it. I'm fine with that at this point. It is what it is. I'm sorry that the state of our country and world has gotten to this point, but, my job as an astrologer is to read the stars and to speak the truth about what I see. And that truth is probably not going to resonate with a lot of people. And, I'm okay with that. I am going to do my absolute best to keep this video as apolitical as possible. Given the subject matter, that's going to be somewhat difficult, but I will do my best to just kind of keep it astrology based. And I will also give the disclaimer that, hopefully you will not shoot the messenger. However, if you do decide to shoot the messenger, understand that this particular messenger believes very strongly in the Second Amendment, and I will shoot back. So, all that said, the subject matter of today's video is the election, November 3rd, 2020, and why it is highly likely that Donald Trump is going to win said election in a landslide, and it is not even going to be close. So those of you who don't want to hear that may want to tune out now and just quietly unfollow, and I'm totally fine with that. For those of you who are interested in, why that is the opinion of most astrologers at this point, stay tuned. So I'm going to show you, I pulled a copy of President Trump's chart, and you guys can do this on your own. His birth information is widely circulated on the internet, right? This is not a secret. And I've also, so this is his chart, and I've added the transits for November 3rd, so the actual transits on the election. And there's a few things, more than a few things, so I'm just going to kind of go through this. I made like a running list, and I'm just going to talk. So first and foremost, I have charted a lot of people, not just in, regular everyday people who come to and see me as my clients, but in my spare time, because I am that big of a nerd, I really do like to study the charts of noteworthy personalities throughout history. And I can say in all honesty that having looked at thousands of charts, I've really never seen one like this. I haven't. And it is very clear that, no matter what you think about President Trump as a human being, his soul incarnated with a fucking mission, right? And that mission was to be a leader, right? I mean, it really was. And, there's nothing about here that suggests, that he's anything other than exactly who he's meant to be. He really does kind of track this so strongly. So, Sun in Gemini, right? Everybody, I kind of make a living off of making fun of Geminis, with good reason, because, I love to hate you guys. But, everything about Trump screams Gemini, right? Talks, the perceived dishonesty. I actually have said this to many Gemini clients, in over the course of the years that I've been doing this, that, it is a shame because, shadow Gemini is absolutely capable of dishonesty, right? No question. It's usually very blatant and obvious dishonesty as well. But, a lot of you guys get accused of being dishonest, and you really don't deserve that. I think what ends up happening, and I'm not a Gemini, and I don't pretend to know this, but I have gotten good feedback when I've explained it to Geminis. I think what happens is that you guys have the fastest moving brains in all of the zodiac, no question. And so I think, your minds move very quickly, and it is virtually impossible for your mouths to keep up with how fast your mouth goes. And with how fast your brain goes. And so I think the net result of that is that sometimes, you're ahead mentally, not quite caught up verbally, and so it can be perceived by others as dishonesty. But for the most part, good, Geminis I don't think you guys really seek to deceive as much as you're kind of accused of doing. So whatever. Sun in Gemini, he fits that bill, no question. Very communicative, probably more so than he needs to be, but hashtag Gemini problems. The bigger thing, though, with his sun is that it is in the 10th house, right? So sun in the 10th house people bring a Capricorn flavor to everything that they do. And, Capricorn is the sign of status. It is the sign of corporations. It is business. It is, ambition, right? And so when people, no matter what sign it falls in, people with sun in the 10th house tend to be very visible people. They are meant to be leaders, right? That, it's not just the sun, it is sun in the 10th house. They are meant to be very visible and kind of out there. So of course, he fits this bill, no question. The other things that are noteworthy about his chart, Leo rising, okay? And not just any Leo rising, like Leo rising in the 29th degree. Now, I've gone over this a million times. The 29th degree is the strongest degree in every single sign. It's the most concentrated degree. So by the time a planet gets to, or anything gets to 29 degrees of any sign, it's experienced absolutely everything that sign has to offer, good and bad. If there was a degree in the zodiac that gives less of a fuck about what you think of it, other than 29 degrees of Leo, I can't think of one, right? This is by far the most egotistical degree of the entire zodiac, okay? So again, and I'm not going to make apologies for this president because he certainly doesn't feel the need to make apologies for himself. And as I already said, he is so in line with the energy of his chart that it's almost comical when I hear people complaining about, oh, he's like this. It's like, you can't really help but to be exactly what energetically you were meant to be. So, getting upset with him about being a loudmouth and an egotistical person, is like getting mad at the sky for being blue, because you just really, it just doesn't really make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But yeah, so again, but leadership also, right? Leo is the king of the jungle. And 29 degree of Leo is, again, it's really meant to, to be out there, to shine, right? The sun rules Leo. This is, it's echoed in so many different places. His hair also is kind of, this is exactly why he does that. Mars rising. Okay. Mars is here at 26 degrees, not quite 3 degrees shy, or right about 3 degrees shy of the ascendant. So, technically in the 12th house, but that's close enough to call a conjunction, especially when it's close to something like the rising sign, the ascendant. He's aggressive, right? He makes absolutely no apologies for himself. And he's a machine, right? People who have Mars on the ascendant are, physically very gifted with a ton of energy, right? He can heal himself. He keeps it moving. We've seen this kind of over and over again. I think it's probably pretty safe to say, and we'll get into this a little bit more for those of you who fall in the camp of, praying for his death over the course of the past week, which, is abhorrent, but whatever. I think it's pretty safe to say that he's going to fall in the camp of the 99.7% of people who move on from this virus and don't succumb to it. So, again, just more and more indications of kind of who he is and the background around it. Now, bigger picture issues here, and this is something that I have seen a few astrologers touch on. It's very important. It's probably the most important thing that I'll talk about in this whole video. President Trump was born on the day of a lunar eclipse. Now, people who are born on eclipse days are, they're fucking special, right? I hate to say that because it's like, but not all charts are created equally, just like all people don't have the same life experiences. Some of us come in and we have very mundane experiences, and others of us come in and we change the fucking world, right? Like, this man came in to change the world, and that is exactly what he was always destined to do. Now, the nodes, right? The nodes of the moon, down here you can see, if you're even paying attention to the chart part, but down here is the south node, up here is the north node. Now the nodes exist 180 degrees apart from each other. Everybody has the nodes somewhere in their chart. And when I talk to people about them, what I usually say to describe them is that they're place markers, right? There's nothing on them usually. Usually what they do is they just show us where an eclipse would be at any given time if an eclipse were to happen every single day. But eclipses don't happen every single day. When they do, they happen on or very close to the nodes, because that is literally what the nodes are. They're just an average. They calculate where the eclipse pattern will fall out. President Trump was born at 10:54 a.m. in Queens, New York. Okay, so Eastern Standard Time. The eclipse that happened on that day maximized at 2:38 p.m. So roughly, not quite 4 hours after his birth. He was born in the lead up to the eclipse, right? In the most peak possible intense eclipse energy that you can possibly have. This is important for a lot of reasons, because, sun opposite moon in a chart is actually quite common, especially in the era before birth control. People who were born prior to the 1960s, it's really common to see people who have sun moon opposition. Full moons tend to bring about babies. I don't think that that's a real big secret. What makes it special is the fact that this is not just any full moon, right? It's an actual eclipse, and his moon is within a degree of the south node. His sun is within 2 degrees of the north node up here. The nodes indicate our karmic path. They're very, very spiritually important things in an astrology chart. His whole emotional and ego identity are caught up in his spiritual path, such that, there's no question that he was always put here to be on this mission of Sagittarius South Node to Gemini. And in a nutshell, without getting too technical about this, Sagittarius is the sign of higher mind beliefs, okay? Belief systems, religions, philosophies, all that fun stuff. Gemini is, the opposite of Gemini, which, technically on the wheel comes first, is the place where we go to gather information. All right. So in the natural zodiac, in the 3rd house of Gemini, what we do is we information gather. We take in all the information that's available to us from our immediate environment. Then we flip up to the 9th house side, which is Sagittarius, and that's where we kind of discern and say, all right, I took in a ton of information, but 90% of this information isn't relevant to me. So I'm going to get rid of all this information, and I'm going to knit what's left together to form belief systems for myself. Okay, so in the natural zodiac, the progression is from 3rd house to 9th house. In his chart, the progression is South Node to North Node, Sag to Gemini. The indication here is that his mission always has been to dismantle belief systems, okay, to drain the fucking swamp, and to replace it in favor of more information gathering, exposure to a wide amount of information, so that the people can decide for themselves what belief systems they want, okay? This is literally the mission that he's been on his entire life. Now, compounding this, and this is what says to me that there's no question that, to the extent he survives to the election, which again, we'll get to, he's winning it, right? That he's fucking winning it. On November 3rd, the nodes are in Sagittarius and Gemini currently, okay? So the nodes were in Sag Gemini when he was born, and they are currently in Sag Gemini. On November 3rd, the nodes will be at 20 degrees of Sagittarius and Gemini, exactly conjunct the spot where they were when he was born, which means that on and right around like a week kind of on either side of the election, President Trump is going through his nodal return, okay? Huge spiritual checkpoint in every person's life. Now, these nodal returns happen for everybody approximately every 18 years. Every 18 years, we are yanked, kicking and screaming if need be, onto our karmic path. So even assuming for the sake of argument that President Trump didn't want to get elected or whatever, the universe would conspire to make sure that it happens. And P.S., you can kind of already see that happening. Ginsburg dying, no real impediments to the new Supreme Court justice being put in, because there's going to be a constitutional shit show around the election, right? Everything is really kind of pushing in that general direction. And the fact that the nodal return is happening on the same day as the election, I mean, there are plenty of areas where astrology can be somewhat kind of amorphous and a little bit difficult to understand. This is not one of them. This is one of the most clear-cut charts I've ever seen around the board, across the board, right? There's just not a whole lot of wiggle room here. All right, other things, other kind of little more marginal things that I wanted to point out. Okay, this, right? So this This 22-degree mark in Capricorn has been a hotbed of activity. I just talked about this not too long ago. Pluto is currently stationed here. He just spun direct 2 days ago. He is going to be hanging out, and this is in November, right? So we have a full month. He's still going to be on 22 degrees. He's going to be on 22 degrees for a while. And you may remember that back in January when we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it happened at 22 degrees, okay? Right here on President Trump's vertex. Now, the vertex is not an angle that I work with, or not a point that I work with a ton, but when it comes up, it tends to come up very strongly, okay? So I've had a hard time kind of isolating when it's going to be important, but when it does get triggered, it's always a very, very obvious trigger. The vertex energetically signifies a turning point area in our lives, okay? So it's based on the myth of Vertumnus and Pomona, which I'm probably going to butcher because I don't know it well, but essentially the idea was Pomona was some sort of like goddess, some like woodland goddess or something, and she was beautiful and all the gods wanted her, but she was like, you know, couldn't be so bothered. She just had to tend to her garden. That was like her job, and so all of these gods would come by and court her, and she would pay them no attention. Vertumnus, who was a god of something, I don't even remember what, but she caught his eye, and he was like determined. He's like, you know, that's going to be my woman, and I'm not going to take no for an answer. So rather than taking the road that all the other gods had taken, you know, he starts to embark on this kind of campaign of kind of trying to fool her, right? So he goes over and over to her, and he appears in all these different costumes, and he's trying to win her over by making it seem like he doesn't actually like her, right? So he shows up to her as like an old woman, and you know, there's other costumes too, and she rebukes him every time. She's just like, nope, I'm busy tending to my garden, fuck off, right? So finally, he's becoming increasingly distraught. You know, he's obsessed with her, and he absolutely has to have her. So he shows up to her one day in some costume, and she gives him the typical, like, I'm not interested. And he gets so upset that his costume falls away. All right. And in that instance, he appears to her for the first time in his, you know, in his genuine, authentic self. And she immediately lays eyes on him, and she falls in love with him immediately. And they are, you know, they fucking live happily ever after in her garden, and all is right with the world. Right. So the lesson is that, you know, the vertex, when it's triggered, the idea behind the energy is that showing up genuine, right, no matter what, is always the best way to get what you want. And you know, so dropping all pretense, right, and even if it happens in kind of a moment of like, oh my God, you know, you just that showing that kind of vulnerable face to the world, you know, if Vertumnus had done that all along, then, you know, he would have lived happily ever after with Pomona a lot earlier than he did. But, you know, whatever. He had to take his lumps first, but then ultimately there's a happy ending, right? Pluto and Saturn have been absolutely tag teaming this degree in his chart. So, you know, we are and have been for 2020 at a very turning point moment, and it appears that this president is the axis upon which this entire turning point is spinning. Okay, so it remains to be seen. Now, Pluto's on it now. You know, Saturn and Pluto, like I said, they were on it before. Saturn and Pluto triggered this virus, no question. All of the shit that's been going on in 2020, Saturn and Pluto, you know, they are 100% responsible for the dumpster fire that is 2020. Pluto's hanging out on it now. You know, the fact that he's sick, you know, that could indicate some sort of turning point as well. But, you know, again, this is all already happening, right? This is a chart of the third, but Pluto is already there on his vertex, and so we're definitely experiencing some sort of turning point moment as far as he's concerned. Two last things. So if you've watched any of my videos prior to now, then you know that I have talked at length about the great conjunction, that the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn is happening this year, 0 degree of Aquarius on December 21st, and that there is a trend that has been going on for the better part of 200 years where any president who is in office during an election year, whenever a great conjunction happens during an election year, the president that is elected that year tends to die in office. Okay, so I've already talked about this. I'm not going to go into the details about it anymore, except to say that, you know, I have flagged that we are moving from the earth element and we're mutating into air, right? So the last 200 years, the great conjunctions have been happening mostly in the earth signs. They're now transitioning over to the air signs. And during that transition, which has been going on since the early 1980s, you know, there have been big things that have happened to those particular presidents. I'm talking Reagan and Bush Jr., but neither one of them died because of it, right? So Reagan, it was an assassination attempt was made upon him. He did not die. And Bush, 9/11, right? So there appears to be a transition also away from the, you know, the death of these presidents. But if you go back through the 1800s up until Reagan, they all died, right? Literally every one of them, Kennedy included, right? Like they're all of them that were elected during a Great Conjunction year. So there is always the possibility that Trump might die, right? Because if he were to get elected, you know, he would technically be fulfilling all of the, you know, prerequisites to that curse. So it really just kind of remains to be seen if, as the air element takes over, you know, if that kind of curse is going to go the way of the dinosaur in favor of some new curse, you know, which now appears to be airborne shit, right? 9/11 planes, 2020, we got the virus. You know, we'll see. We're very much transitioning, and so it's really hard to tell. And last but not least, I will also flag that, you know, as if 2020 isn't enough of a shit show, Mercury will be going retrograde very soon, next week. And, you know, because timing is always just so perfect in the universe, he is stationing to direct on November 3rd, okay? So Mercury retrograde is, I'll make, you know, we'll talk about this more as it gets a little bit closer. I've talked about Mercury retrograde ad nauseum. Not going to get into it here, except to say that Mercury retrograde in and of itself is really not that big of a deal. Generally speaking, you know, it's very chart specific. And, you know, if you are not a Virgo or Gemini rising person, Mercury is not your ruling planet. So it's really not something most people have to worry about. But, you know, I get it. People like to worry about it because why the fuck not? It is 2020 after all. However, if there are going to be days where Mercury retrograde sucks, the days are going to be the station days, right? So those are the days that bookend the retrograde, where the planet, whichever planet, in this case we're talking Mercury, appears to be sitting still in the sky. Now, Mercury at full speed covers 2 degrees of the zodiac per day, right? He's fast. The only body that's faster than him in our zodiac is the moon. When he stations, he spends approximately 3 to 6 days, depending, in one particular degree range, right? And on one particular degree, which is a long fucking time for Mercury to be anywhere. We're going to be right smack in the middle of one of these stations on the election, right? So Mercury is going to reach the 25 degree mark of Libra, the end of the retrograde, on Halloween, actually, on 10/31. And he is not going to move onto the 26th degree of Libra, ticking forward again, until November 6th. All right, so on November 3rd, that's the day that he actually spins direct. We will already be kind of sandwiched in that week-long station that's happening. This election is going to be a shit show. Communication-wise, mail-in ballots, whatever it is, right? Like, you know, we've seen this coming too, right? Like everybody and their mother, who has half a brain, has kind of understood that there's no way that this election is not going to be a nightmare. And I'm telling you, the stars say the same thing. So vote, but please, if you can go out and food shop, if you can go out and hit Target or whatever, get your ass out there and vote. I don't even care who you vote for, right? I really, at this point, the universe has got it. Like, I'm so done fighting with people over Biden versus Trump. But vote in person, do it, right? Because even that, I think, there'll be a fair amount of turbulence around that. But this mail-in voting shit is, we're gonna have a long time before I think we actually see what happens, unless the landslide is just so abundantly clear that we don't really need to get into all the bullshit. But, again, the stars are aligning for an absolutely insane election. So, thank you all for watching. This came out a lot easier than I thought it would. And, vote.